Have you ever heard of the term called an emotional gag order? Where essentially there is a gag order where you cannot speak, but it's emotional. My name is Esther Goldstein, and I'm an anxiety and trauma specialist. And just this past week, I had a few different conversations with some trauma therapists who were talking about this concept of, sometimes we feel, or our clients, or whoever it is that we're working with, feel like we have constriction in our throat, or feel like we are being, have like a gag order, but it's an emotional gag order. What that means is when we're surrounded in certain cultures or social norms or family dynamics or expectations or secrecy, we might have this experience of almost being under a gag order. And it's not an actual physical gag order where somebody's covering you, right? But it's a verbal and essentially emotional gag order. The reason I'm talking about this is because so much of my passion in working in the trauma informed field is about normalizing and naming realities that many of us, humans, therapists, doctors, and clients, and all of us alike experience but don't always understand. There's a real power in understanding that what you're experiencing has a name and what you're feeling is real, and that there's actually a way to work with it. What happens is many times is that clients land up in the therapy office or people reach out for help because they're having, like I've spoken about a lot of times, like belly aches, tightness in their belly, feelings of panic, obsessive thoughts, feeling very depressed, feeling down, having a hard time connecting with people. And essentially what's going on is that there's this inability or this fear of sharing what really is on their mind. Maybe it's from the past or maybe it's in the present, where there is almost this like unspoken agreement of what is allowed to be spoken about and what's not allowed to be spoken about. So if you're finding that you're feeling either constricted in your throat or your body's feeling tight, or you're just noticing that you're not feeling yourself in a relationship, in a workplace environment, or even within your own mind and body, I get curious if like maybe there's some kind of implicit or nonverbal emotional gag order, or some kind of gag order, so to speak, where you're not allowed to talk about the person in the family who's controlling, or maybe your partner doesn't like when you talk about things that upset you, or maybe in your community you're not allowed to talk about abuse, or maybe in the workplace environment people don't want to talk about, someone who's in a position of power who's not very respectful to other people, or maybe it's something else. Maybe you have opinions or thoughts or questions about, a religious sector that you're part of, and you have real questions that are valid and real. And maybe you're around people or places that don't have the bandwidth or capacity to hear you out and to support you. And so I want to just kind of name this because so much of healing in good psychotherapy or in life is when there's space, where there's energy, where there's capacity to share, and where there's an opening of saying, wow, I'm realizing that I'm holding this. Even if you don't share it with anyone, it's like, wow, I'm realizing that I'm holding a lot of sadness in my relationship. Or wow, I'm realizing I'm holding a lot of anger towards someone in the family. Or wow, I'm realizing that I feel incredibly invisible when I go into this kind of environment. And just even noticing it for yourself could be a huge sense of relief. Obviously, the next level is actually having the words and being able to share it with people who can support you and hear you is really powerful. But if you're someone, or if you love someone who is experiencing some kind of emotional gag order, please know that it's a real thing. Well, I came up with the term, but I'm sure somebody else has coined it before. But hearing these conversations, I'm like, oh my goodness, it sounds like an emotional gag order. You can't talk about certain things, right? Or I know myself, I was once in a group dynamic where there was this power struggle going on, very implicit but very tangible, and I named it, and I was kind of shamed. I was almost being punished for naming a dynamic because I'm playing with the equilibrium, right? There was a dynamic. One person was being disrespectful to another person in a very passive way. And to people who are emotionally not attuned, they'd be like, what? No, it's fine. It's a joke. And it wasn't a joke. And I said, hey, can we just talk about what happened? I'm the person who's bringing it up. And I was kind of like, and they all looked at me like I'm a little nuts, right? So sometimes there's even that piece of like, in that moment, it's like, wait, am I really nuts? Or did I say something that upset all of you? And if I continued, right, in that space, I actually took some time, reflected, and I said, look, there's something going on here. We can either acknowledge it, or we could choose to not acknowledge it. But for us to continue being able to have this, whatever it was, we really need to be able to tend to this in a good way for my own health and for the health of the group, right? Or whatever it was. So in family systems and relationships, it's not a matter of if there's a dynamic where you can't speak, then like you're shunned, or that relationship or that workplace environment or that family is no good. It just means that it's important to be able to acknowledge it, notice if there's kickback or there's shaming or there's emotional punishing because of it. And if you are having symptoms, just know that it's normal and it's there. So many therapists and so many people have experienced this, know the feeling, and being able to name and identify what's really going on, what's being allowed and what's not being allowed could be the difference between feeling like you can breathe and live and be honest and respected to feeling shut down and stifled and kind of trapped. So just naming this, if this resonates for you at all, I hope it can be helpful to you in some kind of way.